Hi. It seems like it's been a long time, and we've all been through a lot the last couple of years. The topic that I want to address today is a question: what is a monk? Or specifically, what is a gay Tantric monk? Which is what Ashram West purports to support and promote. So let's look at each of those sections of those words and see how it applies in the situation. So, first look at the gay part, right? Many people think that being gay is only about what people do sexually. But we know that's not true, that even people who don't engage in sexual behavior can experience gay feelings, that is, attraction toward members of their own gender, and can also feel like their gender identity is fluid, that they incorporate aspects of gender identity that are sometimes traditionally thought of as masculine and other times traditionally thought as feminine. And this is a good thing. This kind of integration of male and female in one being is part of what makes gay identity so special and also so suited for deeper spiritual life, where we have to transcend the dualities of male, female, and dark and light, and so on. So, what about Tantra? Well, the Tantric monk is a monk who follows a path of what's called Shaktivada, that is, sees the world made of consciousness, and that this same consciousness has two aspects, one that simply observes and one that manifests. And this unified, integrated view enables the Tantrika to enjoy life. There's no need to renounce anything, but rather to affirm that everything is consciousness. Then the monk part. This problematic word, and yet a useful word. So, traditionally, monks have been celibate men and women who live dedicated spiritual lives, often in groups, sometimes not, like in traditional Hindu monasticism. There were wandering sadhus who mostly spend their time alone, but they also form communities like the Dashanami orders of Shankaracharya. And Buddhists, of course, had large monasteries in India before they spread over the rest of the world. So this idea of a celibate, dedicated life, first of all, it's celibacy. In Sanskrit, the word that is used to mean celibacy actually has nothing to do with sex at all. It is brahmacharya. Brahmacharya means one who walks in Brahman, Brahman being consciousness, the word for this universal consciousness. So one who walks in Brahman is a brahmachari. However, monastic organizations found it useful to require people to abstain from family life because it freed them from the ties and the responsibilities of supporting a family, and so their energy could be devoted exclusively to spiritual work and service. So, but there's also a yogic idea that if you can serve this spiritual energy, that it creates a special nerve called the ojas that helps with meditation. Now, my own experience with celibacy is it can be helpful. Certainly when I was very young and just entering the spiritual life, not being involved in dating and all of that kind of stuff conserved a lot of energy for me to do my studies, my meditation, and so on. And it was very useful. But there came a time when celibacy became not so useful and more of an obstacle to me, a distraction. And then I began rethinking how necessary or even useful that was in my spiritual life. So, but that doesn't mean that I ever gave up the dedication of the monk. Monks who are dedicated to meditation, prayer, and ritual, and so on, need not give up that just because a celibate life may not be suitable. And one reason celibacy is a particularly difficult challenge for gay identified persons is, unlike heterosexual persons, when a gay man, for instance, goes to a monastery, he's not away from the distraction or the temptation of men. And he can never be, because he habits his own male body. So he bathes and sleeps with his own male body every day. And this is a level of, let's say, temptation that heterosexual people, I think, can never really fully appreciate or understand. So that's why the Tantric tradition is particularly good for people who want to dedicate a spiritual life but not a celibate life. Now, this word monk is useful because it does indicate that kind of dedication to spiritual life. Not so useful because of the celibacy connotation. There are monks, Zen monks, in Japan who marry. So the word monk has been used traditionally in Buddhism, in some schools of Buddhism, for non-celibate, dedicated practitioners. That's fine. That aside, let's look at this dedication as something that is self-chosen, not necessarily defined by anybody else, not defined by any order or tradition. It's just the way you choose to live. And if you choose to live a dedicated life, you have your daily practice, you do some kind of service, then you are a monk. Whether or not you're living in a monastery, whether or not you're celibate, you are already a monk. Now, in Sanskrit, there's a word sadhu, which is a better word than monk to describe this state of the dedicated practitioner. Sadhu means a good person, a holy person. And even in India, the word sadhu often refers to monks, but there are all kinds of dedicated practitioners within India. And even those who purport to be celibate aren't always. I had a very reliable report from a tantrika from Nepal that a lot of the wandering sadhus that go throughout India regularly engage in sexual behavior with one another, and especially the men. So it's nothing to be worried about, nothing to this is a good thing. So if you feel like you're a monk, if you've been a monk, if you've actually lived in a monastery as I have, there's no need to give up the power of that monastic identity just because that particular monastery didn't work for you. You can be the monk that you are. And all you have to do is understand, are you dedicated? Are you practicing? Do you want to be of service to the world? And if you do, then, in my mind, you are a monk. And I encourage you to take that in and own it. Use the power of the monastic identity to support your spiritual life. But don't feel you ever have to conform to anybody else's idea of what it means to be a dedicated practitioner, to be a real monk.